Before K-Wave, Fatal Fury was the SNK fighting game series, distinguished by a deep story, unique gameplay, and a one-of-a-kind of a main protagonist. Fatal Fury had spawned multiple sequels and even found its way to other media with motion picture movies and comic books. It's true that the series has been left aside for the last few years, and by few years I mean more than 20 years. Its legacy still lives on through multiple characters that made the jump to SNK's other flagship series, the King of Fighters. This ranking is based entirely on my humble and subjective opinion, so don't freak out if you don't agree with it. It's only natural to have different opinions. There are exactly 10 games in the series. Well, technically there are 11, counting the one on the Neo Geo Pocket, but I'm not including it since I never played that one. Without further ado, here's the Fatal Fury games ranked from worst to best. November 1991. 4 years after the release of Capcom's original Street Fighter, SNK's answer was a superior game in every shape and form, offering 3 playable characters instead of 2, detailed stages, an interesting plot, and a much more responsive and fun gameplay. The selling point of Fatal Fury was its multi-plane stages. The combatants could move freely between the front and backgrounds, making the fights more dynamic. Or at least that was what they were hoping for, I assume, because in all honesty, this feature wasn't ideally implemented in early games, and it was frustrating trying to catch the opponent who were constantly jumping from plane to plane. The other strong point of Fatal Fury was its main protagonist. Unlike typical martial arts practitioners who were usually the main characters in fighting games, Terry had and still has a unique and distinguished design that separates him from the masses. Unfortunately, the game didn't gain the success it deserved, all due to the terrible timing when it came out. Just 3 months after its release, Capcom launched Street Fighter 2, and we all know how that game turned out to be. Suffice to say, Fatal Fury became quickly an obsolete fighter. However, that didn't stop SNK from taking notes and significantly improving the series from there. Cherry and his friends were just getting started. Roughly 1 year later, Fatal Fury 2 was released, improving upon every aspect of the original game. The player could choose from a whopping 8 characters, while 4 others were reserved as bosses controlled only by the AI. Now, where did I see that before? Fatal Fury 2 was the game where many iconic SNK figures made their debut. The ninja, or so she claims, Mai Shiranui, was added in FF2 as the first female fighter in the series. The Taekwondo master and justice zealot, Kim Kafwan, joined the roster, becoming a main staple not only in Fatal Fury but also in other SNK franchises, and Wolfgang Krauser replaces his half-brother Geese Howard as the main antagonist of the game. Of course, the lone wolves from the first game, Cherry, Andy and Joe, were present as well. Gameplay-wise, FF2 was among the first fighting games to introduce supers or desperation moves, devastating techniques that each character can perform once their life bar is depleted to a critical level. It's noteworthy that FF2 got an upgraded version titled Fatal Fury Special, which had significant changes and deserves its own place on this list, but more on that later. The sole 3D game in this list, Fatal Fury Wild Ambition, is a remake/reimagining of the first game. While the story is pretty much the same in both installments, Wild Ambition expands on it with a lengthy intro cinematic showing the origins of the hatred and enmity between Terry Bogard and Geese Howard. That being said, the roster is certainly a lot bigger than it was in FF1. In addition of Cherry, Andy and Joe, 9 more characters are available from the get-go, including Geese himself, though some fighters from the original game like Richard Mayer and Tank Furu are absent. Wild Ambition introduced 2 new exclusive characters, the senior fighter Tuji Sakata and the young transfer student Tsugumi Sendo. It's kinda sad that they are nowhere to be found outside this game, with the exception of their cameo in KOF 2002 UM. 2 additional characters can be unlocked in the PlayStation version, these characters being Duck King and Ryu Sakazaki under his Mr. Karate persona. Gameplay-wise, several features were added to balance its 3D nature, like the guard impact and hit blow. This was my first fighting game on PlayStation. I remember how I was blown away by the realistic graphics and amazing soundtrack. These were simpler times. Arguably one of the most obscure installments in the series, Real Bout Fatal Fury Dominate the Mind is a weird case. For the most part, this PlayStation exclusive game is a port of Real Bout Fatal Fury Special, but there is more to Dominate the Mind that calling it a simple port would be quite wrong. First, let's talk about its plot. While Real Bout Special is not canon and has no story elements, Dominate the Mind is actually a superior game in this regard. The story focuses on White, the new villain of Southtown who took Geese's place after his death and even managed to subjugate his subordinate Billy Khan. The game also introduces a new protagonist, the young pilot Alfred, who helped Terry and his friends defeating White. Some gameplay changes were implemented, most notably the removal of the two planes that the series is known for and the addition of new super moves to some characters. But despite all these changes, I still consider Dominate the Mind as an inferior game overall. It's true that it has a story, but one can argue that it's probably non-canon. Plus, regardless with what fighter you'll finish the game, you're gonna see the exact same ending anyway. And let's not forget those long loading times. As the fifth installment of the series, if we include FF Special as a separate entry, Real Bout Fatal Fury chose to have a curious title instead of just calling itself Fatal Fury 5. Let's cut to the chase. Real Bout Fatal Fury feels rushed and lazy, especially when we compare it to its excellent prequel, Fatal Fury 3. There are several reasons justifying this statement. For starters, the game didn't introduce any new characters. True, you may argue that Shunrei and Shunshu weren't playable before, and Kim and Billy were absent in FF3, but still, they are all returning figures from previous games. Another disappointing point of Real Bout were the stages. Only 4 in total if we accept Geese's. The game will put you against a group of 3 opponents at a time, and you're gonna have to fight them in the same stage during all 3 matches. To be fair, the stages do go through some small changes between each match, but these changes just can't hide the fact that this game is very poor with its settings. If I can think of one strong point that Real Bout Fatal Fury has, then it must be the story. It was during this game that the long conflict between Terry and his nemesis Geese reaches its denouement, ending by the death of the crime boss. Canonically speaking, Real Bout is the last installment in the classic Fatal Fury games before the 10-year jump leading to Garou Mark of the Wolves. It's not a bad game by any means, it's just a disappointing one and a sad regression compared to FF3. Fatal Fury Special is an updated version of FF2 with more characters, a new intro, additional stages, and some story changes. This is easily the best way to experience Fatal Fury 2. Released 1 year after the original game, FF Special was the entry that put the Fatal Fury series on the fighting games map. In addition of all the previous characters, the 4 bosses who could only be controlled by the AI became available for the player from the start. Furthermore, fighters from the first episode also made their return. These fighters are Duck King, Tank Furu, and Geese Howard. Because of that, the story of some of these characters was retconned in FF Special. While FF2 had cutscenes showing Krauser beating Tank, the King and others, they were simply removed in Special since these characters were back again and it wouldn't make a lot of sense if these cutscenes remained. But the biggest surprise that the game had was the guest character Ryo Sakazaki as a hidden boss. Ryo's addition to FF Special among Terry Bogard and his band was so popular and hugely welcomed that eventually led to the creation of the King of Fighters series. My first exposure to the series was with this game. Fatal Fury 3 Road to the Final Victory is simply a masterpiece that improved on every aspect of the series. Graphically, the game was stunning for the time with its updated sprites and gorgeous stages. Speaking of stages, they're among the best not only in the series but in all classic SNK games. Just look at that Honfu stage. Who's Honfu, you ask? He's one of the new characters joining FF3's roster, alongside Franco Baj, Sokaku, Bob Wilson, and the Jin brothers Shunrei and Shunshu, who were the secret bosses of the game. FF3 was also the entry where Blue Mary and the Yamazaki made their first appearance before becoming the iconic fan favorites. In terms of gameplay, the multiple planes feature that the series is known for underwent a much needed update. There were 3 planes in each stage instead of 2, but the characters' moves were limited in the auxiliary planes. In short, the annoying jumping from plane to plane that the AI liked to do at the time was something from the past, and consequently, the pacing of the matches was a lot better. For the first time, the story doesn't take place during a fighting tournament. It was more of an adventurous treasure hunt for a mysterious artifact. The story was quite deep, with memorable twists. I just love the multiple witty dialogues that the characters had between them before and after each match. If you never played this game, just what are you waiting for? After the disappointing original Real Bout, Real Bout Fatal Fury Special came out to atone for all its predecessors' sins. Mission accomplished. As the first non-canon entry in the series, RB Special didn't introduce new characters, but brought back many fighters from previous games. 19 playable characters constituted the roster from the get-go, including the bosses Billy Khan, Lawrence Blood, and Wolfgang Krauser, who was again the final boss this time too. However, his half-brother Geese can also be fought in his Nightmare version as a hidden boss, and in the home version he can be even selected via a code. Additionally, there was an alternate version of 4 characters that changed the way they fought. Graphically, the game was a sight to behold. It is still to this day one of the best looking fighters. And let's not forget the outstanding soundtrack, Mary and Mice themes being my personal favorites. Gameplay-wise, the annoying and unfair out-of-bounds mechanic seen in the original Real Bout was removed. As a replacement, the wall-breaking feature causes the driven character against it to be stunned, which is a far better fate than an instant KO. Real Bout Fatal Fury Special is the game that I played the most back in the arcades, and if I based the ranking of this list on pure nostalgia, it would have been my number 1. Take everything you liked about RB Special and add more to it. That's Real Bout Fatal Fury 2 in a nutshell. Yet again, this is another non-canon entry in the series and thus has no story elements. But unlike its predecessor, Real Bout 2, subtitled The Newcomers, brings 2 new characters, the Native American boxer Rick Strode and the young Chinese waitress Shan Fei. And of course, every other fighter from Real Bout Special is present as well. While the 2 plane stages is still an existing feature, the wall-breaking mechanic was removed entirely in this title. Graphically, RB2 looks at least as good as RB Special, and in many cases it seems even better with extremely gorgeous stages and super detailed sprites. It appears that with each installment, the series conforms more and more with the overall fighting game standards. Real Bout Fatal Fury 2 is the last game in the franchise that is still faithful to the series' unique playstyle before completely reinventing itself with the number 1 entry. Funny how the best Fatal Fury game doesn't even have the Fatal Fury name in its title. Nonetheless, Garou Mark of the Wolves is the latest entry in the series and its magnum opus. So many things could have gone wrong with this game. Garou is a departure from the rest of the franchise with its fundamentally reinvented gameplay. Gone are the multi-plane stages. The novelty with Garou was its TOP system, a feature that gives the player some considerable boosts such as increased damage output and health regeneration, but they could only benefit from the system as long as their health bar is within the TOP section's range. I know this is not a good explanation, but trust me, it's a lot simpler than I make it sound. However, the biggest risk that was taken with the Garou is without a doubt its roster. With the exception of Terry Bogard, who had a cool design update, none of the classic Fatal Fury characters is present. The whole roster is original. The good news are, they don't feel out of place or shoehorned at all. Most of them are related in a way or another to figures from the old generation. Garou takes place 10 years after the last canon Fatal Fury game after all, so it makes sense that a new generation of fighters shows up. This was a bold risk that could have easily doomed the game, but surprisingly it succeeded with flying colors while other fighters had stumbled in this regard. I have no idea how they did it. I haven't even talked about the graphics of this game. Simply put, this is one of the best looking 2D fighting games, period. As you may have all noticed, the series was getting better and better with each installment, reaching its top quality with Garou, and then it just abruptly stopped. And you know what? Nothing will be more fitting and better describe how anticlimactically this series has ended than concluding this video just as abruptly. Special thanks to my generous patrons for their support. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and why not consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching.